I gotta remember to mute. All right, I think as always, I think we're live as soon as I click the button. So welcome to the Urban Files, where me, Max, and my co-host Chuck talk about anything related to cities. What's up, Chuck?
So, hey Max, how you doing? And first of all, to all our viewers, I just want to extend, I hope that you all had a great Halloween yesterday. And if you celebrate that you got Dia de los Muertos, we have a 15-month-old daughter, and we happened to take her trick-or-treating for the first time yesterday for real. So that was as adventurous as you think it would be, but it was amazing. She was a good sport. She carried her bag the entire time, and it was awesome. So that was my most recent thing.
Awesome.
Max, anything new for you lately, or any other events?
Yeah, we had Halloween as well. Happy birthday to my oldest, Jaden. He's just turned 6 over the weekend. Along with the Halloween celebration, it was, I think, to quote him, for the best weekend ever. So
Awesome.
Anyway,
yeah.
Let's roll into this because I know we don't have a lot of time. We're going to talk about the World City Festival today. It's a sort of an international conference about cities. I've heard it called the Davos of cities, and it's presented by Resonance Company. Is it company? Resonance Co.
Resonance Co. Yeah, Resonance. I think consultancy or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're based in Canada. This is their second year running this festival. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the festival that you experienced. I missed it this year, and then also sort of talk about their best cities rankings, which they release every year.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was, year 2 of this, and I think that they're definitely still seeking in growth. And there are a few new things I noticed this year. Just to give you some background, what they did was really meant during the pandemic. And so, so often we go to conferences in various areas of niches or areas of passion, and COVID kind of grinded all of that to a halt. So when Chris Fair, who's the president of Renaissance at the time, his big idea with this is that he wanted a way to bring thought leaders together. And the benefit of having it in a world city format was that, so often at a conference, you pick a specific location. A lot of times it's domestic. It might be New York. It might be New Orleans, wherever it is. And people pay a several $100 fee, and, people gather there, and it's great. It's a great time and everything. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, I think the barriers to entry for both consuming this information from thought leaders and to, just really also the range of who could participate was so wide, because they had basically 5 virtual host cities. They had Hong Kong, they had New York last year, they had several other cities that were involved with that. And so they kind of went with that same approach this year. And so it was interesting that this year they kind of structured it more directly around different cities at different times. So on the day that I was in specifically, they had started the morning in Dubai, and then in the middle of the day sessions, they were in Houston, and then later in the day, they were in Vancouver. I think the previous day they'd been in Singapore. So it was really cool to be able to see not just one place and really be able to, without the big commitment or time or anything like that, experience several different cool sessions.
Yeah. I don't think as much as you'd want to commit, I don't think it'd be possible to have a conference where you actually literally travel around from Dubai to Singapore and in America in one day. So was it 24/7?
So it was mostly 24/7. It ended about 5 o'clock on the third day.
Yeah,
and they did have sessions at 12 and 1 in the morning. I'll be honest with you, I caught those later. And that is a plug for you guys. I think a number of their sessions are still on there at worldcity.org or com or whatever the exact website is. And you can watch those, I think, for free if you create an account and everything. At least some of them, the sessions are visible. And so that is something that if you're looking to get some ideas or just learn about some of these places, you can go ahead and do that. So that's pretty cool.
We'll put a link to the site, to the conference, in the description once we're done here. So what stood out to you, I guess? What's your biggest memory or takeaway?
So I found it really cool to see on the first day they had Singapore's public housing director. And one of the big initiatives that she's done in a really dense Singapore city, which has around 6 million people in a space that would be denser than most US cities other than perhaps New York, and providing 80% of the population with 1.1 million homes over that period. And so I think with Singapore, one of the things that maybe comes to mind for people that are Americans and are not especially familiar might be Crazy Rich Asians, because that was the media exposure, and you had the mansions and you had that. And obviously Singapore has had tremendous success as an economic engine over the last few decades, and it really has been an economic miracle. But the reality is that you also have a fair number of middle class, you have working class population there. And Singapore has helped to, in a almost city skylines, or like, I guess, I don't know, I'm trying to think Walt Disney, but kind of that Epcot utopian vision has become a reality with so many people in housing that is functional and connected transit. And so it was really cool to get her insight on that.
Yeah, without a doubt, objectively speaking, Singapore has seen tons of acclaim with regard to their housing policies and affordable housing, considering how incredibly expensive it is there in general market values of housing there. So good point. Also, I guess Singapore is also claimed for the 15-minute city concept, where basically in urban planning, if you can have everything that you would need to live on a daily basis within 15 minutes walking of your home. And I would say Singapore, the entire country, it is a city state, but the entire country is basically all 15-minute cities. So yeah. I mean, all of that centers around strong housing policy.
Yeah. And it's human scale. You know, you have that idea of a grand bustling core, and not that that's not to be desired also, but what Singapore provides is it has access to things. If you have access to a workplace and a grocery store in that short range, that's something that really, you know, some cities don't necessarily have that ability to do. I think another surprise was that Houston, which really is, according to some at least, seen as somewhat antithetical to urbanism because of its no zoning policy, but it was one of the major hosts of this event. And what I really found is probably two of the other sessions that were really engaging. One, and this kind of tells you how broad the range of speakers and everything was, they had a session from Johnson Space Center in NASA, and they were actually really talking about the future of space living and residential. And they had people from there that were, you know, directors at Johnson Space Center and people in that vicinity. And they were really talking seriously, not just about getting people back to the moon, but kind of establishing that long-term colony and kind of, you know, using space as more of a resource, because, you know, obviously we had that ability to go, but that ability to actually achieve scale there has been a bigger problem. So I found that really interesting. And I think even if you only have maybe a moderate interest in cities, you might enjoy watching that. Another thing was food, and they had an entire session about kind of the soul of Houston's food scene. And I think, you know, you and I both know, I mean, Houston's probably one of the best cities for ethnic food in the entire US or world even. And just in the fact that you have homegrown food, you have a very significant population that has migrated from New Orleans. So you can get crawfish, you can get Cajun and Creole food throughout the city. You can get, you know, a lot of the most popular domestic American foods, barbecue and Tex-Mex. And, you know, then you go abroad and you've got a very significant and varied Asian population. You can actually get regional Chinese cuisine there, which is something that's basically unheard of in many parts of the US. And even the Nigerian food scene there is massive, with that being the largest concentration there in the US. So there's so much to offer if you manage to get in there.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, that takes me to, I guess I want to make sure we fit this in, the Resonance Best City rankings. They actually, unlike the first year where they unveiled the rankings at their conference, they did release these a few months ago. And I actually, shamefully, never did look at these rankings. So it wasn't until we were just chatting before that I looked at them for the first time. So I wanted to, ask you what you thought of the rankings, and I guess sort of give a brief overview of the results.
Okay, and so this is, first of all, what I think that you and I both really like about this rankings is that it's not, I mean, who knows, maybe it is, but in some ways there's going to be bias in everything, but there at least appears to be some level of subjective, or I guess objective thinking in terms of arranging the scale. So they have kind of 6 P's that I remember, and unfortunately I cannot remember all of them, but there's product, there's place, there's programming, and unfortunately I can't get the other 3 for you right now.
People, prosperity, and promotion.
Very good. There you go. We got it. So we got all of those there. And so a few that I noticed, having lived in Orlando for about a little over 6 years, I do have pride in how high Orlando is ranked. They're at 41st. And I think tourism and kind of destination element is the name of the game here. I know some people are on here saying, oh, is Orlando even a real city? But the reality is Orlando attracts 50 million people per year. I think Orlando's urban part in itself is very underrated for those of you that can't. There's even like a catchphrase, Orlando doesn't suck, and it doesn't. So, that's very much a thing that has caused them to be ahead on that list of cities that are well larger than Orlando. It's one of the smaller cities in the top 50. The Middle East and Doha Qatar actually came in, and I don't know if I said that right just now, but they came in at 12th in the world. And that's a new city that is in some ways similar to Dubai in terms of its great importance just logistically as a airport, and also the shipping connection down there. That choke point is one of the most important in the world in terms of shipping and industry. Obviously, it is kind of perhaps less well known in Dubai since it's had a later start, but just based on the importance of it as an airline hub and logistics and everything else, and along with a growing tourism industry, it did pretty well. Moscow actually came in at number 4. That's a city that, I think, again, if we're talking true US stereotypes, like Mother Russia, like that's like, that begins and ends the American understanding of it. But it's a massive 500-year capital that took over for Istanbul as third Rome, and kind of the eastern, being the dominant city in the eastern portion of the European continent during that time. So it actually rated first for museums of any of the cities, and just has it ranks highly across the board in various other components in terms of attractions, in terms of education. And then, of course, number 1 is London, and they seem to actually have kind of gotten the better of New York in many of these recent ranking lists. Sometimes they alternate, but I think London, really one of the ones that was highlighted was airport connectivity. And it's very difficult to argue that, because, from London within an 8-hour radius, you can be on most of the world's continents, and you can probably be to like half of the world's population in that span of time. So those are some of the highlights that stood out to me. It is, again, maybe not a perfect list, but it's worth looking into because they actually do their homework.
Yeah. There's no perfect list for everyone because we all have different experiences and different opinions. But yeah, I think they do a very, very thorough job of explaining themselves and being transparent, which doesn't really happen with most other lists. I'm just going to go and add some things onto what you were pointing out. beginning with Orlando at 41, like you said, which is very good, especially considering sort of the size of the city and the metro. But it's interesting to note that Orlando is really at 41 on the strength of its product and its promotion.
Yes, yes. And those make sense in terms of like really being such a global hub for theme parks. And really, exactly. Disney is just so out of scale compared to any other theme park in the world.
Right. And then Doha, like you said, really, for a top 20 city, it really made a huge jump. And but what interesting there to note how different it ranked in different categories. So for prosperity, number 1 in the world, and for people, number 11. And then you've got several categories where it's in the hundreds or the 200s. So really, there's really a divide there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it didn't penalize them as much as it maybe could have. Yeah, it's interesting.
And then you have since we mentioned Houston before the rankings, Houston did pretty well as well, coming at number 32. Mm-hmm. And probably for the US, that would put it sort of in the top 8 or so, right?
Oh yeah,
top 10 for sure. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. I mean, there's so much to break down here. We're just sort of scratching the surface.
Yeah, it really is a great event, and I hope it does continue to grow. I want to thank Chris and Resonance for putting it on. And, you guys definitely, if you love cities and you love our content, you will definitely enjoy checking out their stuff as well. I binge watched it for months last year.
For sure. So, all right. Well, it was fun as always. Next week, we'll do this again, and we're actually going to do it in person because we'll be heading to the APTA Expo in Orlando.
That's right.
So I'll see you there on Monday, Chuck, and we'll see you all as well.
All righty. Have a good week, guys.